Hi guys, this is Pilleater, and I am joined with Arby. Hi Arby.
Hi.
And I'm here with my co-host John.
Hi.
Awesome. So, Arby, you were telling me that you were actually the mod on the alternative left subreddit, actually.
Yeah, I there's ZXZ is the original moderator, and he for a while he used to be the own moderator. I don't know the guy, but somehow I just sent him a PM, and he was like, "All right, just join up," and I was like, "All right, fine, I'll join," because oh man, that whole shit with r/socialism on Reddit, man, that shit was a fiasco. I got kicked out, man.
Oh,
They they were fucking 1984, man. That was like ingsoc. I call them fucking r/ingsoc because
that's
those
funny.
motherfuckers kick all the people out, and the shit just like did you know the whole incident with the cat girl draw girl?
I heard about it, but
Yeah.
I didn't really research into that. But funny you call it 1984, like 1488 would be like the meme Hollywood neo-Nazi. I guess a 1984 would be a hardcore lefty socialist, if that's an interesting.
Yeah, they as for my I'm still a socialist, but my conclusion about the whole concept of communism is that not that it's in a utopia, it's just practically impossible to get from this point. I mean, the amount of social engineering would just be insane to get something like that. Because first, you would need to get into a post-scarcity economy. Second, you would also need to get rid of all hierarchy and all bureaucracy in the government. And third, you would just need to eliminate all potential governments from like a classless and stateless society. So essentially what you would have is a bunch of like you know how primitive people I've been reading a lot on this, but you know how primitive people had band societies where basically they were just families roaming
Yeah.
around.
Oh yeah, that's like
So
classic.
essentially, what I was
Homeostatic.
thinking, and this is an interesting concept that I really wanted to write on, is imagine communism as basically high tech nomads wandering around in a super abundant where basically everything is produced, and they basically just entertain themselves for all time or something like that.
Is that something like Neil Stephenson's book, The Diamond Age, about a post-scarcity society?
Well, essentially, well, that's what you would have as a prerequisite for communism as an idea, because you can't have without pre. You have to have no scarcity in order for people to not fight and for there to be, how should I put it, the eternal peace that John Locke always talked about. It's just impractical. So my
Star
best,
Trek.
yeah, kind of like Star Trek. It's impractical. So my solution as alt left is to do something. I'm more of I have a weird ideology where I support cooperative businesses, kind of like mutualism, old fashioned Proudhonian mutualism. However, I've also been reading up on something called post Keynesian economics, which I know you, Pilleater, don't really care about economics, but it's just something that I like to.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about economics is just I never really was interested in the whole. I mean, it is interesting to talk about it. I just always would get lost in it. Maybe because math's not really my thing, but it's really quite simple. I know
It
economics
you
does have
don't
interest in it.
really need to know that. I mean, I fucking suck at math, but I still really appreciate the whole math shit and the calculations, statistics that's involved with economics. But you don't really need to, be an expert in calculus to do it.
How do you differentiate, say, what you call left-wing economics versus right-wing economics? Like, have you heard of
Oh,
Gottfried Feder?
it's basically how you would idealize it is that um left wing economics in general is trended towards uh, not collective interest, but more attachment or well, actually, kind of yeah, collective interests versus like individual interests, which doesn't mean that individualists aren't socialists. On alt left, I have a link to what's his name? Ah man, who's the guy who wrote let me just a sec, guys.
Well, we could be talking about alt left names that are circulating or
Okay,
actually.
Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde wrote an essay called "The Spirit of Socialism," and Oscar Wilde was an individualist. Max Stirner was also an individualist, and his ideas contributed to what Karl Marx believes.
That's funny you mentioned Max Stirner. This might be off topic, but the Underworld Amusements is releasing a limited edition of 45 copies of Max Stirner, The Ego of Its Own, George Steiner edition, which I actually placed a copy of.
Shit.
I'll share you the link with you right here, John. You might be interested in that, but it's about $30. It's a nice copy of The Ego in Its Own, and I remember reading Stirner about 4 years ago when I was a sophomore in college on my own. But it's a nice read, and I don't know,
Thanks,
that's very interesting about
that.
Stirner. But if you want a copy, limited to 45, they're being sold right now at. But yeah, it's interesting you mentioned some of these names like Wilde too. I mean, certainly the whole left-wing tradition in the past is kind of. Mostly people will associate the left with everything established today, namely like the French critical theorist of Derrida, Lacan.
I'll be honest with you, I kind of like the whole idea of critical theory. It's just that the only issue I have, the Frankfurt School in general, they weren't really good. I don't like them a lot, but at least there was one guy that I've heard was pretty okay, but in general the Frankfurt School was not really good. They tended to be more detached from praxis and more oriented to philosophy. So they were mostly like ivory tower intellectuals who just kind of made their theories and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird today because if you supposedly, take a GRE test in English studies and you might be learning half of it through some of the European traditions that might sound very far right, but then you have half of it with today's more established-minded people who, from maybe like John Stuart Mill up in today from Derrida or Foucault, which seems to make the established New Left school of thinking, but they don't really say they are, a part of the left-wing spectrum. They say they're a part of this big, grand scheme of understanding
that's bullshit.
the world. Yeah, and so it's going to be really hard to determine whether this is proper left-wing versus, extreme apoliticalism, which seems to me that how can the left be proper?
Oh, God, I fucking hate centrists. Oh, I just want to stay out of politics and just let's all get along, guys. We shouldn't do anything. Come on, guys.
But you're right. The centrist behavior is like when you know something could be possibly left, they say, well, this has nothing to do with the left wing, when it really does. And I think there are other places like I think Verso Books and Jacobin Magazine well know that the best thinkers they know on their side were properly left-wing. It's just that the institutions haven't really recognized the left-wing because, the alt-right has a name called cultural Marxism where...
Oh, God, no. Come on now. Cultural Marxism.
Could we talk a little bit about the origins of... leftism? Is it
cultural
Hegel?
Marxism? Listen, cultural Marxism. I've been reading a lot into it, and basically, it's more of a term that's used by former Marxists who became conservatives out of personal interest in back in the 80s and 90s, and basically, it's equivalent to the Judeo-Bolshevik conspiracy theories back in World War II. Sure, It's not that they've adopted Marxism, unless the only way I could see cultural Marxism working is that somehow the entertainment industry will make people revolutionary and fucking overthrow the overthrow the capitalists and fucking make the USSR great again or some shit like that. But that's not what's happening. It's actually the exact opposite. It's pacifying people, and essentially it's going against class collaborationism, and basically it's bullshit.
So I noticed you have a Hegel, is it, on your avatar?
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about how Hegel influenced in terms of, I think there's the Hegelian dialectic, I think,
right,
the slave master.
I really haven't read Hegel, and part of the reason why is because Slavoj Žižek.
Yes.
Well, he has a term for Hegel called Hegelese, which is true because I've read the motherfucker, and man, I can barely understand him, and it's probably because it's an acquired thing, And Schopenhauer also fucking hated Hegel. He called him he also called him a charlatan, which is a little bit too harsh. It's his language. That's mostly it. But the what I like about Hegel is that it's like I haven't read a lot about him, but I really want to get into him. And also I find the picture absolutely hilarious. Just like imagine somebody in a YouTube comment and they see like a picture of an old-fashioned European philosopher with like a little anime girl standing right over there and smiling right at you.
Are you a fan of Ryan Englund's alt left
Oh
Stammesdot
yeah, I've
Chronicles?
seen that. That guy honestly seems like a alt writer pretending like he seems like the fucking wolf trying to dress up as alt left. Because the whole issue I have with him is that his whole like shtick is that racial awareness and all of that. And while I do let me be honest with you, the whole racial issue, I understand that there are some differences between races. Like for example, the stereotype that black people can't swim. That's true. It's because their muscles tend to be less fat ingrained in them, and that's the reason why they can't swim, because their body weight is just like it makes them sink more. But the whole issue with race is that whatever differences in intelligence are probably skewed with something called a lurking variable, which would be their poverty rates, which tend to be higher because of their whole. I just think that it's more the argument shouldn't be more that white people are more superior in Europe and things like that, but just that white people had access and they expanded into parts of the world that were probably the most prosperous, just in terms of mountain infrastructure and things like that.
Have you heard of the Flynn effect, James Flynn?
No, I haven't.
I think Flynn came up with a theory. He's a fairly recent. I think he works in HBD, Human Biodiversity, but he said that IQ is increasing, at some sort of exponential rate, in countries where people are given access to first world conditions.
Right.
I'm not sure what Flynn's current.
It's because they have more resources, because they don't have basically the resources. I'm assuming hypothetically, the resources that they have to spend on hunting or food gathering or work isn't as much, so they can spend more resources on education, which is probably why they're or not even education, but just neural stimulation. Honestly, like intellectual
nutrition, maybe.
Yeah, that's why I'm thinking. So part of the reason why Africa is so just generally so underdeveloped in terms of things like that is probably because their whole climate is just generally inhospitable. I mean, you have malaria-infested central jungles, then you have like the Sahara Desert, and then the only parts of Africa that are really good are probably South Africa, which has a Mediterranean climate.
It's interesting that you've have some criticism towards Ryan of Stammesdot Broadcasting, which we had a podcast with him just 2 days ago on the Stark Truth about his latest activities, what he's been writing about, and I do have to agree with Ryan that especially that the whole social justice warrior culture is out of control, and that I would
yeah,
agree
hell yeah, it is.
that what I've learned is that right now the left is a sick man, and an old sick man in a bed that really needs a reform right now, or at least
I don't think it needs a reform. I think it needs to be quiet for a while, and then once the right wing, all the energy is spent up with the right wing, and people see the collapse that's going to happen because of their policies, they'll turn back to us, and they'll basically say, all right, we're going to turn back to you, but here's some things we need to change, and those things have caused our chaos in the first place. It's like a cycle, endless cycle. It's like the hero's journey, archetypes, always one switch to another, and then something. Liberals take over, then conservatives take over, Democrats take over, Republicans take over. It's a tendency in human beings in general. They always switch. They always change.
I always think it's interesting, though, that there is this flirtation with the alt-left being on right now. I'm pretty sure you do you know of Rabbit's alt left and Ryan's alt left, and then there's Prince of Queens alt left, and even barrier
Yeah,
guys.
there's just so many. There's like my sort of alt left, which is like the socialist alt left.
Yes.
Then there's the
Okay.
liberal alt left. Then there's the social democrat alt left, which would be I don't know their names personally. I don't know the guys. I just kind of hang out and I watch their videos. But I know Sammy's that. Do you know? Is that who you're referencing?
Yeah,
Sammy's
Ryan
that?
England. Yeah, Stanistat
Right.
Broadcasting. Yeah.
Yeah, his tends to be more social democrat. Then Prince of Queens, God bless him, he's a liberal, and then and then there's plenty of others. I mean,
But I feel as though that this term alt left, it's kind of like with the term with alt right, right? Because when you had the old right, which was pretty much Nazism and this hardcore fascism, this one party politic based upon, terrorism and genocide, and then you have the alt right, which pretty much reforms all the alt right by stripping down stripping
yeah,
down these things and saying what is the
I,
value to mean
I've
right
I
now.
had
wouldn't
some
so
pers-
much.
I've had some
Sorry.
personal issues with Nazis in general because Arbanon is the old medieval term for Albania, and I have ancestry there. And basically, one of my great grandfathers was almost sent to a concentration camp from the Nazis just because he was pro partisan, which were the communist guerrillas that fought there.
I was just going to say, I don't think National Socialism is the furthest right you can go. I mean, that would be more sort
Maybe.
of reactionary, monarchist.
Honestly, yeah, I see. National Socialism is like the whole ideology in general is. Uh, I mean, I've heard fascists talk about World War II, and they said that it was very racially oriented, and they wish it was more economically oriented. Which, I mean, God bless them. At least they're self-criticizing of themselves. So, whatever.
Could I ask about critical theory as well? Usually that gets quite a bit of flack for being a totally negative or destructive influence on culture. Is there any aspects of critical theory that you can point out that would show positive or
Right. I could point out many things. Firstly, is that critical theory is very against consumer. I don't know. Many right wing people tend to have these presupposed suppositions about things, just like all us left wingers have. But their critical theory tends to be very critical towards our current society, like consumerism and things like that. And and they tend to criticize certain aspects of our like culture. Now, is this criticism good? Yes, I believe it is. However, the praxis to end or mitigate this harmful effects of consumerism and things like that, I don't like. For example, feminism and things like that. The issue I have with feminism is that it's gone to a point where pretty much, unless you're in the third world or second world, male and female instances of violence are not institutionalized, but they are rather more more individual things, remnants, maybe you could say, of previous times.
Yeah.
remnants?
Remnants.
Oh, okay.
Like you know how the KKK was part of the institutionalized system after the Civil War. They were old fashioned redneck, take you need, they were part of the infrastructure of how capitalism exploits different. They manipulate different races and basically divide and conquer. The good stuff. However, that sort of ended when capitalists eventually found out that people were starting to get more educated, and as time went on, they ended their I don't know, their relationship with racism.
I just wanted to say, back on it's interesting we're talking about, there's totally different subgenres about, about the left and the right, and it's as going back on that thought. about how the alt-right is now really popular. If you could say that the whole election and victory of Donald Trump has a lot to do with the power of the cultural mean and tech power of the alt-right. But at the same time, however, with this whole alt thing going on, there's also an alt-left, and this is something we were
I'm going to
talking
be
about.
honest with you, Pilleater. I appreciate your enthusiasm about it, but current population in the United States is showing that there are more old people than young people. So, and most the internet stuff tends to be towards younger people. And while I am young myself, really kind of really young, but we're getting older, and most old people don't tend to use the internet and look up beautiful anime women and all that kawaii stuff. They don't do that, and they're the main voting block that we're using. Like, how those fucking Republicans always win the elections in Florida. They always get the old fashioned right wing. Man, gotta vote for George W. Bush because he wants to keep our Social Security and things like that. So basically, as we get older, we're getting older and older, which is also something that's kind of worrying me. There's many things that are worrying me about society in general.
But yeah, that's interesting how you mention old and young people, and you could say that young people have the movement or some cultural power, but they don't
And
have the
also
means
something else.
to.
Do you know who the Situationists are?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
There's this. They're kind of linked to critical theory, but I fucking love the Situationists, man. Even though
the situationist art is really pretty.
they're awesome, but their whole spiel was part of the they were this thing called they were this whole youth movement in France. They were back when the left was energetic, just like the alt-right right now. They were, all the young and hip people. Even Sartre was involved in it.
Is it related to data as well?
That was earlier. This is back in the 60s.
That's
I
right.
swear, Pilleater, there was a revolution that was going to happen in France in the 60s. There were students but the issue was that there were too many young people. There was a whole book dedicated to how there was not a revolution in France, a second French Revolution, because all the people who revolted were young people.
It's as well as I think it was 18 something. I learned this in my one political science class. There was there was an anarchist party meeting up. I forget the situation story, but it's something what you just said, that because they were all anarchists and all very young, they didn't have any established norms or experience, and so they were all just anarchy against themselves, and it collapsed.
That's the whole issue with anarchism. If you've read into Revolutionary Catalonia, you can see that they were doing good. They had cooperatives and everything. But the issue is that they were similar to America during the Articles of Confederation. If you a history buff like me, basically the whole issue in America was that basically each state was technically its own country, de facto its own country, and basically they could make their own currencies and things like that. And that's the issue too. Just something about there just needs to be a state, and that's what I espouse. There needs to be some sort of multi-party socialist federation that needs to be built. That also not necessarily socialist, but cooperativist. So there can still be conservative cooperativists and liberal cooperativists, but they still espouse the same economic virtues. Just like how in our society there's conservative capitalists and liberal capitalists.
It's yeah, I mean the thing is I think that that's interesting proposing these plans, because as I was about to say, that we noticed that the alt-right is extremely cultural, that they don't really have plans for the future. You just do these trolley things, or you just
they're not gonna last, Pilleater. Listen, the alt-left thing, it's gonna be a fad and it's gonna wear off, and I'm very aware of that.
That's what I was getting to, but
I'm gonna enjoy it while I still can.
Because whether you're reacting as alt-left because there's an alt-right, and is the alt-left just a left-wing faction of the alt-right, where it's just guys who want more liberties and freedoms, but they're alt-right guys. But I'm trying to say that there might be something more bigger than the situation we're in. We're definitely in some post-postmodernism, or in fact a post-multicultural and diverse era.
Everything seems to
It's a hard question to ask.
regress to the mean.
I'm not really you know, a predictor, or what are those things called, like in Delphi, the oracle. Yeah, I'm not an
Oracles.
oracle of Delphi, but I can be very vague like the oracle, and I can say that many changes will occur, and great things will happen.
I feel as though that right now, like I do like both the spectrums of the left and the right, and I always feel that I always preferred a left wing, an alt left for myself, but my definitions, or what I've been writing for, might contradict with the established left might have. The same way somebody who's alt right might write something about alt right things
Yeah,
and might
every time.
conflict with someone on the Daily Stormer or on Stormfront, right? I always feel like if I write something alt left, some hardcore communist or Stalinist is going to find out about that, and it's like,
Oh,
no, you're not a true leftist. And so it's this strange thing, right? That people
yeah.
prefer colors, right? You were we were talking about what's that kid's name? Xerxes, Xexizy. Can
Oh,
never
Zexizy. Man,
Xexizy.
I love that guy.
Yeah, I remember watching his. He had a debate with one of these alt right posters, and I
Oh
remember just
no, not that,
Aristotle.
bruh. That was horrible, man.
I don't. I
Oh,
thought he was pretty good, but
they got a fucking transhumanist to
oh
yell
yeah,
at
oh
the
yeah.
debate
He said
with
he was a
him.
special
Who was that?
snowflake.
If I may ask.
I remember. Thank you. I remember that now. But
Oh man, that's
Who
a knee
was it?
slapper right there. Man, Zexisy. Man, I remember when Jason Unruh fucking burned Zexisy randomly. It was one comment he made on his channel, and fucking Jason Unruh like fucked him over. It was hilarious.
but
Sorry, could I interject about who was the transhumanist? Because that's a really
I
interesting
have no
aspect.
idea. Like they were like literally debating. Hold on, it was like this. Okay, so imagine the Nazis, right? Or not Nazis, but alt left, the alt right guys hang out, and then you got the left wing guys. They're bashing at it, epic, battle between the branches, and then they're saying they're proudly stating their orientation, and then this one guy is like, "Hello, my name is John Doe, and I am a transhumanist."
he said he was a special snowflake of sorts.
And then silence. Not one person spoke for 5 seconds, and then they were like, "All right, okay, who will be next?" That was literally how it went. And
That-
I
that-
have, yes.
Sorry, that seems to be a really interesting and really odd phenomena of the alt-right or the right in general, the obsession with transhumanism, especially in the reactionary sphere. You know about...
That's very strange. I would tend to think reactionaries, of all people, would not want to... It's strange. You'd think reactionaries would want to revert back to, like, a feudal system? Not even capitalism,
yes.
feudalism. But they want to... maybe some sort of technologically advanced feudalism, which is kind of strange.
Yes,
I mean,
that's exactly what they
make a
advocate
very
for.
interesting book concept for me to write on, but I don't really like it.
It's funny because in that same debate between these alt-right posters and the alt-left guys in Xerxes, it was kind of this strange thing where it's like, I disagree with you because you're that, and then the other side was like, I disagree, but we could both agree, but we're both passionate about the
Right.
ideologies that we have.
Honestly,
And so,
Honestly, I'll be right about the alt-right guys that talk to each other. The Aristoteles or whatever he's called, the pseudo-intellectual douchebag. So basically, that guy, I honestly kind of like him. I've listened to Culture Conf occasionally, and other than the rubbish they talk, the shit posting on Marx, like artistic screeching, yeah. So other than that sort of stuff, they're really good people. Like, they're pretty smart, and they make good points on the books they read.
yeah, I mean, it seems to me that both sides too, as you were saying, that one could be, this Hitlerite, and the other could be the Marxistite or the Stalinite, and it kind of, you always have that leering of cult of personalities. I just never understood why my leader is better than your leader kind of mentality, when in fact that...
Zexy isn't a Stalinist, though.
I know,
he's
he
a
isn't.
Leninist.
Yeah,
He is-
that's right.
But honestly, I kind of fucking love Lenin. I'll be honest. I mean, I don't really like the USSR or the way he turned the USSR, but I still love Lenin as a person.
Could you tell us a little bit about Leninism, like what that actually entails?
Well, Leninism
Versus,
espouses something called there's a whole slew of leftist ideologies that I can talk about. You guys want to talk about that before we go
Sure.
into like anime shit? All right. So let's start with Leninism, move into Trotskyism, Stalinism, maybe some of the really retarded stuff like Pol Pot. Nah,
No,
like
no.
like
not
not
that
that
far.
stuff. Let's go into then we can go into anarchism and maybe into left communism, which is my favorite, honestly. Left communism is my favorite. Those guys are very lovely. But anyway, so Leninism espouses vanguardism, which basically says that there is an intellectual class of people who not only inspire the revolution, but they also move into the party, and it's called the Vanguard Party. The Vanguard Party is supposed to serve as the revolutionary apparatus where the intellectuals or just the people who are leading the revolution lead it to a state. And from that state, Lenin thinks that as they develop socialism even more, it will eventually wither away because there's no more need for a state. And to a point like late stage socialism when the state will be weak and then it will eventually become a beautiful communist utopia. Now, Trotskyism is slightly different because Trotskyism espouses that basically what Trotsky was he was an anti-Stalinist, a fervent anti-Stalinist. He said that Stalin completely ruined the revolution, and basically Trotskyism is more methodological way of practicing Leninism. I'm not a Leninist, or I haven't read much of Lenin or Trotsky, but I do understand the basic rudiments of their ideologies.
Is it true that Stalin was slightly anti-Semitic versus Lenin? Who was Jewish?
He was. There was repression of Jews. Yeah, ZXZ. There's honestly a beautiful argument between an anarchist and Stalinist that actually touched me. Basically, the anarchist was like, "You do not kill." He was like, "Your person, Stalin, killed all these Ukrainians. You do not kill fellow workers for your cause." That is the main. And honestly, that personally touched me because I mean, he was right. He killed so many people, and you could make all of the hilarious dank memes you want, but that's still that dark fact will still remain with Stalin.
Is that the Skull Mountains they talk about in Russia?
Some of the measurements may be exaggerated, but yes, Stalin did kill a lot of his political enemies and a lot of people he generally did not like. Moving on. Hold on. There's like a whole slew of them. There's like we could go into anarchism. There's like anarcho-communism, which is basically there's anarcho-communism, anarcho-syndicalism, and then anarcho-collectivism, which are a whole slew of basically different methods to approach a direct transfer to late-stage socialism or communism, supposedly. So basically, the only main difference is that anarcho-collectivism wants something called labor vouchers, which honestly I found very interesting. I can't explain it to you in detail here because of time limits, but it's still an interesting prospect. And then anarcho-syndicalists believe in trade unionism, where basically workers, instead of doing a violent revolution, they just all decide to, stop working, take control of the means of productions, and then go into anarchism, which I kind of like. And was actually done in revolutionary Catalonia, which was technically successful.
It seems my favorite forms of the left. It's often argued whether anarchy is considered left wing or right wing or just a middle ground, and then you could have a segregation between.
I could talk about anarcho-capitalism.
And yet, at the same time, you have this left wing where you're talking about all these idols like Lenin and Trotsky, and
right.
But at the same time, there are different forms of the left of different flavors of Coca-Cola, and depending, you could have a Reddit where it's anarcho-syndicalism and then anarcho-capitalism.
Right. Yep, they have that.
And it's almost like a lifestyle choice. But at the end of the day, it's like what are the
aesthetic.
values of being left wing, and what is it? What is it? Is it based upon liberty, freedoms? Is it egalitarianism? Is there something more to it? Is it a tradition
It's
after the French Revolution? And
honestly, I think the latter thing you said is probably the spirit of the left. They are basically the eventual result of the Jacobins, and the Jacobins were basically the fervent capitalist revolutionaries who, basically they're the conclusion to that. They believe so, and but onto the whole discussion of the left-wing ideologies, I could talk about more, and there is like Maoism and Stalinism, but I will explain the ideology that I was before I became like my own like special snowflake thing, where I want like
left, right?
like not alt left, post Keynesian economic cooperative socialists, which I don't know what the hell I would be. I went to ask my ideology on Reddit, and they were like, maybe a libertarian syndicalist, and I was like, that is weird. So I'll just.
What do you mean by post Keynesian?
Post Keynesian economics, yeah. Post Keynesian economics is different. There's I think that's the I was introduced to the ideology by what's his name? Man, Rebel Absurdity. If you know his channel on YouTube. He's like the coolest guy. Honestly, I don't even know the guy, but like his whole spiel, that snarky British, that like not snarky, that smooth British accent, and that cold but yet comforting talk about leftist ideologies and things like that, enraptures me in his gloriousness. I could worship the guy. But anyway, yeah. But basically, I've been dabbling in it. And I honestly need to read more into it, but I've been a lazy motherfucker, so, but I need to read more into it.
How I defined it my own left in some respect, and how I was making up and experimenting with this alt left, that I did realize that the reason why there's a left wing is because of, I would say that there was a complete misunderstanding in the whole monarchist European tradition, and that's why kind of the French Revolution happened. And I always said this. I said the French Revolution was a misunderstanding. What was it? I don't. What did I say? I said something about communism, not exactly a mistake, depending if you want to say if it's a mistake or not, or a utopian thing. I always think it was. No, it wasn't. I think I might have said in an old past that communism was a mistake, but mistake as in that its outcome seemed to deny human natural things, and
I think it technically can be done within human nature. I just think that because human nature is very plastic and very manipulable. Like you can easily turn some people into Morlocks if you have enough time and enough fucked up people, manipulating them and doing that sort of stuff. But the issue is that how are you going to get the means to do it?
And then I said, that's right, I said that the New Left school and the Frankfurt school was pretty much a miscalculation or an error based upon the thinking of communism. And so you have these three Trinity things going on at once, And at the same time, I think the alt-left is trying to restate its vows, that understanding that, okay, in the Western experience, there had people like freedom, and that people have certain liberties, and a good society is one where we can act upon these liberties without other people. It sounds a lot like libertarianism, but it's quite not. You could say
the libertarian ideals. Even though I'm a leftist, I still admire many libertarian thinkers, just their whole idea, and I think it can be linked with market style socialism. And basically, that could be a much better conclusion to libertarian ideals than free market capitalism, free market socialism.
So in a alt-left situation, you have to now reform everything you know about what is considered left-wing, because the alt-right has said that, well, the alt-right has been tainted through this weird establishment Marxism. You could say, well, it's all Jewish, therefore it's evil.
Come on now.
You know that classic argument. It's Jewish, it's Judeo, it's bad.
Yeah. Sure, go on. And there's plenty of right-wing Jews that also helped in right-wing, extreme right ideologies. There was right-wing Jews who were fascists. Mm-hmm. Like, how much...
Jacobinski...
They're crazy guys in Israel.
Yeah, I forget his name.
I've heard that actually. There's actual
Yeah,
neo-Nazi
I've listened to their
Jews.
anthem.
Yeah.
I've listened to their anthem. I mean, they have a cool logo, like the Jewish star and like a raised fist and like the yellow field. I mean, it's cool. The whole fascist like aesthetic, I like it, and I wish the fasces, the symbol of fascism, wasn't tainted like it is.
Well, I was talking about Joe Jabotinsky. That's I think Ziev.
Yeah.
I can never, but he was a very famous Israeli kind of fascist
Yeah.
leaning. But the point is, the point is that we're at a situation right now that's really hard to be considered left wing. You might, because here's the argument. The argument is that there's the whole social justice warrior culture, the claim of quote unquote culture Marxism, the claim that there's a left wing media, the whole Chomskyite thing happening, and so you really have to start from scratch. And
we could talk about the low energy Chomsky man.
And see, it's really hard because that just gives ammo for the other side and say, well, the left is the right, and now they're reinventing the right. What was good and evil, now it's hip to like evil and reaffirm it as. So I think of the alt-left as something like that. Now, when I was writing my thing on the alt-left, I always argued that, okay, it's about, here's my thing, it's about friends, family, freedom, right? Everybody wants friends. Everyone has a family. We have families to have responsibilities in, and we want our freedoms. The three Trinity Fs. And I remember writing about that, and I have the article somewhere in my, but I'm kind of saving it later until but I was meaning to write more on alt-left and contribute to Rabbit's own alt-left, but at the current moment, my theories on alt-left are put on hold because I'm already busy with my own Asian Aryan thing, and so I might write more stuff on the Asian Aryan. And at the same time, however, when I speak about Asian Aryanism, it sounds like the word Aryan is a reserved right-wing Nazi thing, right?
How about I've been thinking about Asian Aryanism, and why not call it Scythianism?
Oh,
because the Scythians, I love history. The Scythians were an Indo-European who were also technically mixed. It was an umbrella term for anybody who lived in the steppes during Roman period, but you could technically call Asian Aryans Scythians.
Yeah, I mean, the word Aryan, you'll think blonde-haired, blue-eyed Nazi soldier, but then it's an oxymoron when you say Asian Aryan. What are you talking about?
Funny. It's funny you say that. There's actually, I don't know if any of you have been to Aryanism.net, which is a very left-wing, but also National Socialist site that talks about...
Strasserist?
Sorry?
Strasserist?
Oh, Aryanism.net.
Strasserist? Were they Strasserist? Because I know Strasserist is basically left-wing Nazism.
I'm not sure if they were influenced by Strauss or not. They were actually influenced by a lot of the main thinkers, such as Alfred Rosenberg, Goebbels, and so it's very, but it's a very unique twist on the National Socialist view. That's actually taken from direct quotes, and they talk about what is Aryanism. It's a kind of a.
Actually, let me reevaluate my thoughts. My opinion of fascism and leftism is probably pretty classical Marxist style interpretation, where it's basically the capitalists have an emergency. It's emergency capitalism in which the capitalists basically surrender their freedoms in order to keep their personal safety, and in which basically it's like emergency button. Like they press it, beep, and then their safety gets compromised, their freedoms get compromised, but they're also safe from the workers.
It's whatchamacallit? It's like today when you're talking about I always think that this whole left-wing, right-wing dichotomy is basically a civil war between the Western world, and really I think it means pretty much the same thing. And I think it's weird when people get radicalized and say, I'm right, I belong on that side of the wall, and then you're left, and you belong on that side of the wall. And that creates, this whole silly centric behavior, centricist, I'm not saying that it should be for centricism, but the ideal that it's been talked about, from Julius Evola, that maybe the left-wing, right-wing thing is like esoteric. It's a white hand path and a dark hand path, or maybe it's like yin and yang.
I like esotericism in general because I've been listening a lot into it because I'm writing a book and the whole Gnosticism ideal is something that influenced it. It's a fantasy book, but basically, I don't really believe it, but I find it very fascinating, and I like to read into it.
Yeah, and so I'm not saying you should be a radical centrist, but I'm saying is that
Yeah,
these energies, it might seem bipolar that you're either this or that, when I think people are just using these terms to really want things which are all natural, things that are natural, but they get convoluted through rhetoric, and then people assume that this guy's that and this is that, when I think, a part of creating dialogue is understanding it's particularly a balance, I believe, between both the parties and understanding. But at the current moment in time, it seems that I think the alt right is like the energy's more. I have to say on the alt right side, and it seems like the left is having a struggle time. And here's what's happened: it's been talking about right now that let's suppose the alt right gets more culturally powerful. Does that mean a change in definitions of what we know as left wing, right wing? Right, one generation dies out, and we have to relearn these things, and then would the left wing be more right wing than it was in the past, and would the right wing be more left wing as it was, or are these going to be obsolete terms, and then we're going to just put these as a new. It's often talk like on Countercurrents. Greg Johnson says that you can have your white ethno state, but white genocide will be off the menu, and basically they'll be always talking about left-wing, right-wing things is because they're harmonious and they treat each other as people. So you have to think about this as a bigger scale,
right.
or this bigger. It's a
like
very difficult situation.
Yeah.
Have you heard of the so-called split, dichotomy between sort of Aristotle and Plato in terms of nominalism versus idealism? So you could say the right is idealistic and the left, is nominalistic or realistic.
I will be honest. I don't think there's a lot of dichotomies that people form in politics, like the individualist collectivist whole thing, and some others. But I just think it's a false dichotomy. The left can be very idealist. Many left can be realists. Many right wingers can be idealists, and many right wingers can be or what I've told you. Basically, it's like a whole. It's based on the individual, honestly. Everybody has their personal ideology, but it's crowded. It's mushed into some sort of coherent body, so we don't all go crazy in espousing our personal ideologies, which we're doing right now.
But I think the leading what's important now. Everybody, we're all kind of artsy people. We have these kind of ways of thinking, and so with this whole Asian Aryan experiment I've been doing on the internet, I think it's funny because I've been calling it something on the alt-left simply because it's the only, I guess, political sphere it would be accepted in, because when I say Asian Aryanism, it seems like both the left and the right are going to call it offensive. Literally.
I've talked to my friends. I've talked to my friends in school about it. About you, honestly. Like, I always talk about Pilleater and his love of Asian Aryanism and the creation of an Asian Aryan ethno-state. And most of the time, they tend to be passive. And some of the times, one of my friends, he's a cool guy. He's a little right wing, but I still like him. God bless him. He always laughs at it, and not because of like he makes fun of it. It's just a cool idea, and he likes to troll behind it.
Well, here's the thing. It's first you're going to shitpost and you're going to joke about it, but joking is the only way to get a serious message across. First, they'll ridicule you, and then you'll be laughing, and Asian Aryanism, who would take that seriously? And then eventually it's like, well, I do like Asian women, or a white girl saying, I like Asian men, and it's pretty nice if my children are half Asian. I want to respect that, Tessie. There's some wisdom to it, and then it slides through. So joking could have a super influential effect through humor. But the point is this. Asian Aryanism would be technically disliked by the far right, for one being degenerate, cuck-like, possibly run by Jews. The far left would dislike it because it's insensitive. You're not treating people as universal. What are you thinking? These classical, problematic, these pseudo fourth wave feminist bullshitters.
Yeah.
And then The normies, they just don't care. They just want to go to the bar and consume. Who cares, dude?
Right.
Just let you know.
That's mostly the reaction that I hear. Actually, most people are like, you're overthinking this. It doesn't mean anything, but to
Yeah,
me,
that's
it's
normies. Right?
huge.
And then Happas, the people who I can relate to, because I'm half Japanese myself, they're like, well, that sounds a lot like a right-wing rhetoric. Are you sure you're not a Nazi and associating with other whites? And it's like, no, you don't get the point. So it's like we now have this four-way split where it's like Asianarian suggests a third position. At the same time, an alt-left is the best possible candidate to help Asianarianism. And I think the reason why is that Rabbit's alt-left states that it's a left-wing faction of the alt-right, where you can have people who believe in all classical left-wing things like liberty, freedom, friends, family, freedom, but also these people who are red-pilled and skeptical about society, since the alt-right meaning, and then they all have Asian girlfriends or Asian boyfriends, and they're okay with that. Now, when I say Asianarianism, I don't mean that it's going to ultimately subscribe to a right-wing ideology. I mean, of course, the word Aryan gives you that, but in no means do... It's not like it's going to be replace the alt-right. What I'm saying is it's happening now, and it's been happening. There are a lot of... All my friends are usually half white, half Asian, or at least I see all my friends are dating Asian girls, or even some white girls I know are dating Asian guys, and it becomes this thing which is unavoidable. And it's this cultural movement where they don't want to be open about politics simply because there's no words to describe it. But given the right time, they're going to waken up to that destiny and start to realize I belong in group. Now, the criticism I think on the left too you might see is through Benedict Anderson's imagined communities. You might even say Asianarianism is some kind of imagined community. Maybe, but I don't. Yeah, I don't think so, and I don't plan on making it a utopia. I mean, I've been also using the words on my new esoteric intro. I've been saying pan-neo-Eurasianist, right? That seems to be a safe word, because the Asianarian is a little too...
That sounds very close to Eurasianism, like the whole Alexander Dugin National Bolshevik thing.
Oh, I don't know
oh yeah,
much of Dugin,
Nazbol Squad unite!
But I'm quite serious. Like, my main target audience I'm really talking about is... I live in a major city. I live in Philadelphia, and I live close to a Chinatown. It's okay. One book that's essential to reading is Christian Lander's Stuff White People Like, right? And if you read that, you can understand this urbanite white person who lives in these cities. This time, though, they all have Asian girlfriends, and they contradict those rules and have their Sweppel things. But at the same time, they're like into weird avant-garde punk bands like Juju and stuff like that. And they like noise bands, and they have this destiny, and some of them might even have half the children. And it's like they can't just deny and say it's not there.
I'm so jealous, man. You living in the north. I live in the southern United States, man. It's like the opposite.
Oh yeah.
Man, I fucking hate it down here. I mean,
Yankeeville and the Confederates.
Sure, it's cheaping down here, but man, the culture, it's just like, I mean, they have good sweet tea. I'll be honest with you. Southern people, they have good sweet tea, they have good food, but just everything in general, it's so, like, disconnected. Everybody's so alienated from each other. It's just like, it makes me want to blow my head off, honestly. Man, it sucks.
Well, down south is completely a different zone than up north, where... But the point is that in these major cities, beyond flyover country or other, it's these weird... It's weird. One of my arguments I've been saying is, according to Charles Murray in his one book, about Fishtown, I think it was about white. I read this in the Bell Curve, so this might be 10 years outdated from the newest edition. But accordingly, when multicultural and a diverse paradigm for liberal whites have just meant for them to choose Asian lovers, right? It meant avoiding blacks or Mexicans or other races, and they really did a biased choice and discriminated for Asians. So that obviously means that the model minority fits perfectly with the white liberal elites. And now I know what you're saying, the new left school calls out racism, stuff like that. Okay, yeah, that's true. But the point is that there's a certain bond between whites and Asians, and it shows you even when the white liberal elites will play dumb with the whole multicultural game and assume all the races are the same, it turns out that they prefer to be with Asians. That's their favorite non-whites, and Asians prefer to be with whites as their favorite non-Asians. And so that is this weird people being formed. And not that I'm anti-white or I want to abolish the white race, I'm not Noel Agashianov, so no. The thing is, what has happened is that this new mixed race of people has been formed because of our whole multicultural paradigm, and it accidentally created them. But not, it was planned, and now because of technology, you can go over there, you can see them, you can build bridges, and
Hey,
stuff like that.
Pilleater.
Yeah.
The whole I had like a brain like a sort of a thought experiment about what a society with mixed race people would look like if every single race combined into one. And have you ever read Edgar Rice Burroughs' The Princess of Mars?
I remember
You know
looking
how
over
the Red
this.
Martians
Oh.
You know how the Red Martians are basically in the mix between all the different races of Martians?
I think I might know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Sort of.
so they made a movie, the Disney movie that was like mediocre. But basically, I was just thinking about that, and I I honestly kind of like it. It kind of adds a different party into the mix. It's interesting.
But
I was. Could I just
I
say
mean, I
something?
might as well be thrown into the gas chamber now. But whatever.
I
The hell with it.
I think a lot of vegetarianism is also to do with the IQ gap between whites and Asians, and apparently there's a male-female IQ gap as well. So that's possibly why you see more white males with Asian females. Is the IQ gap is closer between them than between, say, white females and white, particularly at the sort of northern end of the bell curve.
what I'm really trying to say is that we don't really live in a multicultural society. It's more like a multi-discriminatory society, and discrimination, I think, is a natural thing that people do. People discriminate based upon people who look like themselves, and they do these, and they discriminate, and they choose people that are similar, that they know. They don't choose strangers. They choose, and so everyone does that by a national liberty. Now, Arby, you could say, I don't know if you're for the whole cafe au lait, one mix people, but I always think that's kind of this folly, this daydream that most white liberals have to feel good about themselves, thinking that I'll have the best of everything. And really, I don't think that's feasible because, right, you have Brazil, and they're all just brown people. And it seems like you add one dominant gene or trait in there, it becomes this kind of burden or anchor, and they don't really get their main destiny or friendly. I think races are formed based upon your traditions and loyalties to certain groups, right? And I always think too that it's kind of this weird extreme sharing that if you were forced somebody to say, why won't you race mix? Take a look at this person from this different. I think that's a completely of a some of these naive, and that's why the whole word caucus came about, is because people really have not drawn boundaries, right? People get into the family and they get out. I think people really need to know about discrimination, using it, and they can't just put on these blinders and say things don't, because it turns out the stranger could be your enemy, and allowing that in is kind of a I don't think there's going to be a one race mix society, and I think that's just a folly and kind of a part of the clarity plan in effect, really. But
Yeah, for the most part, I do agree. I don't really necessarily agree with the whole bell curve style categorization of different races. And while I do think, honestly, I do think biology is a major indicator, not a major indicator. I tend to think of it as more of an undercurrent, a sort of, I don't know, like how the Earth, the tectonic plates of the Earth, and how the climate is affected would be affected by the tectonic plates. It's there. It's a huge thing that's been for millions and billions of years, but I just don't see it being the whole it was around during ancient times, in primordial times when our primitive ancestors were around.
mm-hmm. and,
Right.
and the thing is, I think there's this folly too with this whole. Some of these people, I don't even think they're so-called leftist. I think there's just could be normal day social justice warrior normie people, or just
Right.
they believe in this like, oh, it's going to be great when we're all one race. It's such an old, outdated, I think, 90s philosophy, really. I mean, there are some socialists too who still believe that, but I think that's pathological altruism, the Bethley Oakley book, and it's just this silly thing where, look, people are going to discriminate and they're going to choose, and Asian Aryanism is basically a classical, because liberals' favorite non-whites are Asians, not blacks, not Mexicans, not Indians. It's this funny thing, and I do think, true, I've said this before, that white and black race relations is one of the most hardest things to understand, and it's certainly an obstacle for every party.
That's very true.
You can't. I don't like to be involved with that, and it just shows you why people just don't want to do with it, because
it's like a couple with a relationship, It's just like there's so many drama, there's so much drama involved, so many nuances and things. Like it's crazy, and maybe we should get over it and start afresh.
I'm the same way, where I feel as though that I just don't want anything to do with it, and really that it's just a relationship that should be isolated until things could. But at the current moment in time, it just looks like things between the two is not happening, and it's just going to be a racial civil war, unfortunately, with whites and blacks. I'm very pessimistic on that.
I don't think the whole race war thing is something that I could only see it happening in the United States just because America doesn't have a Yugoslavian style federation with different ethnic groups, and the closest thing we have to ethnic and cultural and ethnic groups are between the African Americans and Anglo-Saxon style, or Italians and things like that. But that's the closest thing I could see.
Now, yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, on that note, you did a podcast recently with Robert Stark, I think, on the Stark Truth about, I forgot who the speaker was, but it was about North Korea and how North Koreans perceive themselves. And
yeah, I've read there's a whole book about that called The Purest Race.
Yes.
It's an interesting topic. It really, when I saw his lecture, I didn't get the book, but I read the lecture, which is probably equivalent to the book, but the whole explanation of it just really blew my mind.
Now, I just wanted to circle back on this, and probably this might be of interest. I think Asianarianism could benefit the left. This might people might say that's strange. How could it benefit the left as much as it could benefit the right? And I think the reason why Asianarianism would benefit a left wing is that it's basically it's a classical freedom statement, right? The freedom statement is that you can discriminate and have an Asian lover or a white lover if you're Asian.
Right.
You can do that, and you can go with other people who are like yourselves, just so as long as you promote this. And you could be, and I said this before, you could be a weeb, right? You could be a white male, white female weebs for the ideology of Asianarianism. It doesn't mean you have to have an Asian lover. It just means you're for this ideal that there's this culture, you consent to this ideal, there's this culture going on the internet, this weird people, Westerners denying their Western interest for a Japanese one, or this kind of...
Yeah, I hate that.
I'm a big entryist and allow them in, because they, like Americans, will put their hand on the Asianarian Bible and say, I am for this, your Asianarian cause.
Yeah, I could see that. You're right.
Then you have Asians who want to be white, or they love Western civilization. Like, this could be the classical ideal that the Chinese, who are like, oh, I wish I was white, or the self-kill. They can be in there too, and then they can have their own places. And then you can have the third burrow of the white male, Asian female, Asian male, white females, the interracial couples dating. And then finally you have the other burrow of Papa, Hafus, Eurasians, just all mixing together. Now you have all those four burrows colliding with one another. There'll be a large amount between white male, Asian female, Asian male, white female in the Asianarian context. And as well, I mean, if there's more white male, white female, and Asian male, white female, and they just stagnate and they get in their own groups, well, chances are it's going to be a high multicultural thing where they're going to most likely on the lines have an Asian Idearian, because they all agree upon that, right? And there's only two groups, right? White and Asian. So there can't be like and I've said this before, I'm sorry, it's not Afro-Asianism. I mean, as much as I like that ideal, it's just I'm not going to be the daddy of that institution, so I don't know. It's just a thing that's this bond between that, and that the arts and creative things could happen. It's something culturally that it'll probably be a small group of I'm just being science fiction and facetious here, but let's say if it really did happen now, it'd be a very small group of people, probably large, and maybe I'm underestimating myself, but probably a large You can probably get the best 500 people and make a little
Man,
community
you
right
could-
now.
Hey, you could get the entire country of Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan to join you.
Yeah, and then Americanize them and tell them to love Japan. And
Oh
then,
man, nah, I can't do that. I love Tajikistan. They're like, you know that one guy that visited you who was like Iranian, half Iranian?
Yes.
That guy was cool. I like
Dude.
the whole. Before we get into the anime discussion, can I talk about like my own
Yeah.
like cultural
Sure.
likings?
Yeah.
I may be Albanian in origin, but I absolutely love Roman Empire and Byzantine Empire, like the Roman and Byzantine empires. I'm like so entranced in like the whole aesthetic and the whole not the whole imperialism ideology, but just like the grace that they once had and the stuff like that. And that part of my book kind of represents the fall of grace of their cultures and things like that.
But yeah, it's just there's that interesting
Hey, maybe we could make a Roman ethno state right next to Asian Aryan stan or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's usually a joke, right? I think the whole ethno-state thing flirted by the alt-right, and particularly Richard Spencer, is just a way of saying go to your room-ism, right? It sounds like ethno-state means there's going to be ethnic cleansing, you're all going to die, evilness,
Yeah,
right?
at first I thought that too, but as I listened to you more, I kind of got the whole shtick.
Yeah, and people should beware of the word ethno-state. It really just means a form on the internet, right? This is
Right.
what's happening. We're living in this post-internet
The
time
circle
where
jerk.
the internet is influencing our IRL lives, our in real lives, and then
Oh,
we're
definitely, yeah.
Oh yeah,
And
definitely. I always
basically-
talk about that.
I think the alt-right and what Richard Spencer is doing, he's just taking the internet and saying it's a reality. And from what we're seeing right now with the whole fraud of multiculturalism and diversity, the post effect of that means go to your room self-segregation based upon consent and going to your own form. And that seems like the quote-unquote progress of what America is going to. So no longer people have to deal with the multiculturalism is wrong because people forgot about discrimination or people forgot about their own liberties. And so the enlightened liberal will probably go away if these trends continue, like with what I'm pushing with Asianarianism, what everybody does in their own syndicate communist form, and then subreddits become communities. And basically, I don't know, it's this strange thing. Ryan Folk once
That sounds
joked
like
about it.
that sounds
so.
kind of like Civilization, like the video game. You have
Yes.
different civilizations that like. That's hilarious.
That's what it seems like the current trends happen.
Could I say something?
Yeah.
Actually, it reminds me of have you heard the French philosopher Jean Baudrillard? I think it's
Yeah.
Baudrillard. And he talks about hyperreality, where something is sort of more real than real, and that's what all these concepts are. They're meta concepts. They're almost greater than reality itself, in the same way that the symbology of McDonald's is better than the meal, the Happy Meal.
Wow, he doesn't have a page on English Wikipedia. That's insane. All right, that's gonna be my first thing when I have free time. I'm gonna. Make
I think
that...
he writes a book called Simulation and Simulacrum.
Yes.
I think.
Okay.
You don't
I'm gonna
want
keep
a
that-
cheeseburger, like you think you're getting a cheeseburger, but rather you're getting a simulacrum of a cheeseburger made from artificial ingredients, and but it consents to the mind
That
that you're
is
having a
weird.
cheeseburger.
That's basically like. That's strange. It's like the Cartesian theater, kind of like the whole solipsism thing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, kind of like it. I kind of like how the whole Matrix. The spoon does not exist.
Now, back to the thing. I think it'd be a little interesting topic is that anime is because if
Okay.
you go on the internet, especially through Twitter and might be on DeviantArt, it seems that now that the best escapist culture from today, the harsh realities for a young white millennial, is to go online and watch anime and read manga and talk with
hell
other
yeah.
peoples who pretend they're anime characters or at least dress up as an anime character. Now, on my Twitter feed, I've been talking to these other girls, white girls, Asian girls, who think they're anime characters, or at least, and why they do that? Because this is what is beautiful. So the alt-right is having a problem, because the beauty of what is traditionally the Aryan girl in the wheat field is not there. Not that Russian woman out in there, and she's a beautiful Lord of the Rings Nordic woman. Rather, what's happening is that the cultural consensus argues that a pretty woman is a blue-haired warrior fantasy princess from an anime nobody's watching, or something like that, or it has
Yeah.
an Asian aesthetic to it.
I like that.
Yeah, me too. And so, but nobody's talking about it. Nobody's
that's
talking. Yeah, it's
oh my
sorry,
god,
this
that's
is all-
insane. I'll be honest with you, Pilleater. In my book, one of the characters is there's this. I could go into a whole different podcast talking about it, but like one of the characters is basically what you're describing.
But yeah, I mean, just I like to retweet things on my Twitter, which I find, I guess, Asian Aryan aesthetically beautiful or Eurasian aesthetically beautiful. There's this guy I was talking to named Alex Maljuex. I think that's his last name. He's from Russian from Australia. He has a whole blog dedicated to. His wife is Japanese. He has, half Eurasian Japanese children, and he talks about the aesthetic and beauty of that, and he thinks it's totally underrated. And he's a good photographer and does talks about these things. And so, on Twitter, if you have, I think there are certainly different classes of Asian Aryan types, what I like to call, and I have yet to. I was talking this with Hannah. Hannah knows what I'm talking about. I talk about from a street punk, Juju fans, Mitski fans, Atari Teenage Riot fans. I come from that background, but Hannah might come from a lower background where it might be the working classes, and you could still have this grody-looking Italian guy with a Chinese wife or a Chinese girlfriend, right? And that's also an Asian Aryan thing, too. And as well as the geeky weeb type that might have a weeb Asian girlfriend. And so there are different classes. It's not just one Asian Aryan couple, right? I'm not saying the tattoo Margaret Showgirl in the gym.
State-enforced anime culture.
Yeah, I'm saying there's different varieties of Asian, and they can
Definitely.
they can be all friends under this Asian Aryan thing. So as long as you just have to be yellow pilled on these subjects.
There's also the more traditionalists. I think a lot of what you currently talk about is under the paradigm of a Western view of Asian Aryanism, but there's also almost an Eastern or a fusion of both. Where someone gets an authentic, like we were talking about earlier, someone from Asia, and they like that traditional aspect of. That's kind of what I like, about Eastern.
And you can also have, it works both ways. You can have an Asian that likes white culture and a white culture that loves Asian culture. But the truth of the matter is, both of them is a synergy between the two. I mean, I'm just looking at some of my tweets I've retweeted right now. I have like a blonde girl with a bra, like typical. Somebody with a tattoo of anime girls. That always tells me there's a...
That's strange.
Like this one girl... I'll do a podcast with Little Crybaby. I was talking with her. She's just a normal white girl, right? But she told me, I think of myself as an in-real-life anime character. And with enough makeup, enough pink hair, and enough look-alike, she can do that. And she's, and she's white male, white female. She's not race mixing at all. But still, it's this ideal that the consciousness is there. And, one follower I love, Anzu, she always has looks like an anime character. And I think to myself that it's so much true. All of this is happening on the internet, but nobody is really talking about it. People love the aesthetic, but nobody... The same with the artists, too. Like those Newground artists and the DeviantArt artists, they are like commissioned artists, and they're all white guys who just draw anime things. And so there's just tons of information to back it up. But right now, at the moment in time, nobody wants to take the Asian Aryan thing serious, so I'm hiding under a Pepe Aleister Crowley and saying Asian Aryanism is meme magic like Popeye Gangster. But I'm thinking about doing an overhaul eventually in the coming months to make it back to serious when I get enough followers and enough subscribers. But it's happening. I think people know what I'm saying. I just got to get more of my writing out there and stuff like that. But I mean, my girlfriend is pretty supportive of what I'm doing too, and she's like, she thinks it's funny.
All right. So Pilleater, so you want to remember that conversation we had about the different animes I wanted to recommend discussion about? So first Berserk, and then Aku no Hana. However, you're the Japanese guy. You pronounce it.
Yes.
Then what's the other one?
Blame.
Blame. I absolutely love Blame. It's the best thing ever.
Yeah. I mean, Flowers of Evil, I saw that about a year ago. And,
you saw it? You mean the anime?
Yeah, the anime.
I'm gonna have to give you an exorcism, because that thing is unholy. I can't even look at that thing.
I liked it. I liked the anime much. Oh, I have to look at the manga, but the
The manga is actually with human beings. So sorry, I'm the style they used in making the anime. It just looks so horrific that I just can't look at it.
Oh, it reminds me of. Oh, what was that? It was this American film from '95. Alex Jones was in it. They cell shaded the characters.
Holy crap! You mean are you talking about like
Waking Life, not Waking?
Yep, yeah, that's it. It reminds me of that Waking Life, where it was like this artsy fartsy kind of. They cell shaded the characters.
It removes all the Asian Aryan aesthetics out of it.
Well,
because
I don't know. Yeah,
because anime characters. Honestly, Pilleater. Before I've seen your channel, me and my friend have been talking about this. My friend says that basically anime people is basically Japanese people's way of making fun of white people. I mean, they have the big eyes, they have the vibrant colors, they laugh and they smile a lot, they move around and dance a lot. I mean, God, it's practically our like vibrant Parisian civilization now.
I would say more of that. Anime is just a reflection of Japanese people, but if you say that,
I would say that.
If you say looking at white people, I mean, you could be talking about
because like
Tezuka,
anime,
but
anime has been influenced. I mean, it's an Asian Aryan thing, right? I mean, you got the American influence in the style of animation combined with the old traditional Japanese.
If you want to go that route down, that's a very interesting way of thinking.
Combining into one beautiful child known as anime.
You could talk about Tezuka. I mean, Tezuka was literally getting Walt Disney stuff and putting it with the woodblock style. But I think later on, anime has... what I've experienced is basically just cartoons of when Japanese look at themselves. But it's funny when you say, oh, well, there is that subtle white influence.
Oh, come on now. They do not look anything like Japanese people.
I mean,
I would agree with that. I don't actually think...
You cannot, seriously. Their facial... Even my father, when I talked to him about anime, he said that they look like a mix between white people and Asian people.
That's a very flattering... Yeah, that's what I like, too. I mean, that's a very nice thing, but that's an interesting way of putting it. I mean, I could see that, but from the many of the manga people I know and some of my friends, I have this one friend who, is Japanese. Most of it is basically just when you look at yourself, like the whole big eye cliche, right? Oh, they just wish they had big eyes. Well, it turns out that Japanese, like another thing they talk about is noses, right? One thing that's a joke is if you have a big, long, pointy nose, that means you're white or you're some person. No nose signifies the nice face. They're so used to that. Or the eyes become the center of attention. You look at... But here's the thing. Don't look directly in their eyes because that means you're getting too personal with them. Unlike in the American culture, you look in their eyes when you do every single transaction. So in the Japanese, you only look in the person's eyes if you are related by friends or by family. But if you look at them, you might put them an omen or a burden or something. Very Shinto-esque. But the whole big eye thing just means trust. That's what I think. And pretty much,
could I say something? To be honest, I'm not a huge anime fan, and I'm not really an expert in this area.
Yeah, I can understand that.
From what I've seen of anime, a lot does seem like it's taken a lot of Western mythology and looking at it through a Japanese perspective in terms of how their ideals would fit into, say, our cultural legend.
Have you ever seen High School DxD, Pilleater?
Not really.
Okay.
High School. Hold on, DxD. Is that with the robot? No. Okay. No.
No, it's the one with the gratuitously large boobs.
Oh. Okay.
But anyway, so basically their whole thing is there's a war between the angels, the demons, and the fallen angels. Like there's two demons, strangely. And basically the fallen angels are supposed to be like the edgy angels who don't like God. But Japanese people tend to use artistic lines. They have more freedom with Western ideas because they're not Western, and and people in Japan don't get offended because they mess around with Western stuff. They don't have SJWs talking about
they convert things that in the West would be seen as quite almost sacred or sacrosanct, and then reinterpret them in a way that would
And honestly, I kind of like
appease Japanese sensitivities, I guess.
that. Right.
I was thinking of Kroll Marati High. That was
I
like
don't
a
know how to
boys.
spell
It was a
that.
boys. Kroll Mariti High. It was like 10 years ago, and it's basically an all boys school, and it's robot. I remember that show, but high school. Yeah, it's interesting because you know, some of these today it seems weird because back in the 90s, anime for the American audience meant Japanimation. It was this strange thing where it was still in that weird avant-garde scene where it's like there were these early 90s films or 80s films and they were on
Like
Sundance.
Howl's Moving Castle.
Yeah, that was later on, or some of Miyazaki's earlier work, like Akira being the most famous in America. It still
Lots
plays
of good memories from that.
in the Ritz Theater in Philadelphia. Like a ceremony every month, they play it at a midnight showing on the last Saturday. But the point is that anime at one point in the 90s, the market was Japanimation, sci-fi, big tit girls shooting guns. And then it all of a sudden changed 10 years later. All of a sudden, even today, it means it was high school girls or something about the drama. It moved away from the mechs and it moved on to social. Now today, it means you must be an aficionado of Japanese culture, which I do like. Now it's funny because in the past 2 years, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which was totally unknown.
I know, right? I had no idea about that thing. And now everyone's talking about it. I'm like, what the hell happened?
But it was a class. I knew it when I was like 8 years old, and I was like, my friends, my Japanese friends were into it, and I was like, oh yeah, it's a weird thing. There's probably good reasons why
I'm like
doesn't like it. And then I started to laugh 2 years ago because of the reboot, and it became this, the West gotta know about it, like it was to Dragon Ball Z, and all of a sudden it's now accepted. And so that's amazing, right? Because people think of authenticity as JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and they think, well, this has been around forever. But the West does finally know in the past 2 years, which is amazing. The same could be said about Pataleo. I mean, Pataleo is still not known. I'm kind of pushing it.
I'll be honest with you. I like the art style they have, but the whole yaoi thing is strange. Like, I know this friend of mine in high school, and she's a lesbian, but she reads Pataleo. I'm like, you're not even straight. Aren't straight girls the ones who watch surrogate shit? Come on now.
Yeah. It's the queerness, right? It's a very queer thing. The Pataleo. It's neither. But the point is, I'm saying shows like Pataleo, or even Cooking Papa, which is about a dad who cooks. These are one of the longest running mangas ever, and they have tradition. Any second now, some publisher like Funimation could pick up old episodes or old mangas, make an English copy, some hipster finds it, it's going to be a big thing in the West, so as long as it sells. The same thing happened to JoJo. JoJo was just a target for that, and it was going to happen.
I've had this dream once. Not like an actual dream, but like a vision. Like, imagine if I was like a director, like the Wachowski's twins, and I wanted to make a fantasy movie that would appeal to Western audiences. What Japanese manga could I use to make into a fantasy movie?
Well, if there's a lot of choices, and a lot of them hasn't been done yet. I mean, now that there's Ghost in the Shell coming out in a few months.
Yeah. How about Berserk? That
Berserk,
is perfect.
I have heard of that one.
Everything.
Yes, Berserk is a very... I think it's crawling. I remember in the anime club about 3 years ago, they played this one VHS copy of Berserk. It's definitely getting its attention.
I love it.
It's
it's like one of my favorite mangas. Have you read Tokyo Ghoul or seen it?
I think so.
Tokyo Ghoul. You're like more of the old-fashioned. I'm sorry to insult your age.
No, it's just fuddy-duddy.
You're like the old-fashioned anime fan, so you probably like, especially the High School DxD thing. You didn't get that. Everyone knows about High School DxD.
That's the thing. Everyone knows everyone on Netflix and Crunchyroll, and I'm still talking about Slam Dunk, Aim for the Ace, and Chi the Brat.
Yeah, you're a '90s kid, man.
No, even earlier than that. I would say
Okay, you're an ancient kid.
Exactly. But I'm saying some of the animes I'm talking about are well known in Japanese culture, but they're not
Right.
I don't know. Some of these newer ones are definitely
Yeah.
there's definitely a market between.
I'll be honest with you. I've been trying. I've been so hard. I've been trying to search so hard, but for a good modern anime, but I just can't find it. The last one I was really invested in was ReZero. Have you seen that? Have you heard of it?
Year Zero.
ReZero. Then
Not
it.
really. I was just looking up because some of my favorite other mangas I've been reading. I read some of the hiragana to practice it. There's this one called Bebop High School, and it's about these two Yakuzuka kids, and they're these are these fuddy-duddy things that I like, which are kind of unknown.
Yeah,
And,
I don't really know much. Oh,
Bebop High School.
wait a minute. Oh no, that's not the one. I was thinking about that one that one comedy anime that kind of reminded me of Prison School with the kids in the high school. Do you know about Prison School?
Prison School. I'm actually going to.
Wow. Man, you've been living under a rock, man.
Oh no, I'm looking at pictures right now. Like, yeah, these are all like new things, and they're kind of okay. Do you know who Kuragahime is?
Kuragahime.
Princess Jellyfish.
Is that one?
Kuragahime.
Oh, that I have no idea. I have very peculiar tastes in mangas. Like I don't read any shoujo. I don't read any yaoi. I don't read any romance.
Okay.
I don't like the lovey-dovey stuff. I like the rip your head off and edgy.
Yeah, the classical Japanimation 15ing era, Cyber City Oda. You know, the classic dubbing that where they swear in every sentence.
Like the epitome of what I would like is Blame. Just the dark, edgy.
Yeah.
But the only thing I don't like about Blame is that there's nothing of substance to it. I mean, it's awesome, but it doesn't have like anything belonging, like any storyline, any critique, anything. It's superficial. I love it, but it's still superficial.
Yeah, for the edgy stuff, I'm trying to think of Japanese edgy, because I'm kind of different with it. I think of more cultural wise, like edgy stuff. I consider is like, Simon Beasley, like American things. But I'm trying to think of an American version of a Japanese version of what is edgy. I mean, you just said Berserk and all this.
What Westerners would consider edgy in anime?
Hideshi Hino. Duh. Oh, that's another fuddy duddy. Hell baby. That is, I love Hideshi Hino, but I guess in some respects you could say he's edgy.
That I wouldn't consider that.
Panorama of Hell.
More like that seems more like kind of weirdish. Like you know those old comics that they showed in like Cthulhu stuff and stuff like that. That's more what I like.
I love Hideshi Hino. He's just like Minio Maja. Very classical. He definitely has a very interesting life. He was born in China. He saw the Chinese. He's actually a trained samurai swordsman. He talks about doing harakiri. I think he might commit harakiri. I don't think he will, but he has a very interesting life, and he was kind of well known in the English world.
Yeah,
but he's still unknown.
Man,
Hideshi
the way I'm seeing this one image of how he draws a person like a woman, and it's just like. It just rings to me that old-fashioned 70s anime vibe that I see in Vaporwave. It's amazing.
That's what I kind of know those things of the past.
Bring back. Make anime great again.
Yeah, today's anime has seen like everything you look on Netflix.
You know what Keijo is?
Could you just explain what yaoi is? Sorry.
Oh. Should I say it?
Well,
basically, yaoi is a girls' form of comics where it's male-on-male love interaction. Basically, it could be passed as gay, depending.
Let me translate it into his language.
Aesthetics.
Imagine Oscar Wilde written by Japanese people. Gay stuff.
I love Akono ga Nai. That's No Money. Do you know what that is? That is a very controversial yaoi manga. It's basically older guy, little kid, pedophilia, rape.
Lolita, like that one novel.
Yeah. No Money.
I mean, that's the closest thing I know to that sort of stuff.
Very controversial. Akonagai Nai, and some girls I know actually like it, but if you look at it in the Western thing, this is like some crazy Peter Soto stuff going on. But
I don't like that sort of stuff. I mean, the youthful aesthetic, it's nice, but
it's kind of disturbing in a way.
I don't like it. You don't children are the one thing that should not be tainted or should not be messed around with. They're children. They can't decide for themselves. Leave them alone.
Yes. But, yeah, I think we covered a lot of anime since then, but I think I'm going to wrap up the conversation here. But it's nice talking, Arby and John. We should do this again some other time.
Right.
Thank you very much, Arby, for coming on.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Pilleater. Potential revenge sequel.
Yes. Nice talking to you guys.
Nice talking to you too.